I'm so curious to learn more about Shamala Goplin, Kamala Harris's mom, because I think it's so interesting that she moved to the United States like at a pretty young age to like she wanted to cure cancer, right? That was like her goal. And I think it's so interesting, like, what did her parents think when she moved her on her own back then? Like her Indian parents letting her, and then what did they think when she wanted to marry like a Black Jamaican American?
How are you, darling?
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, we're having actually a heat wave down here. So it's fire season, unfortunately. So California fires are acting up. But yeah, it's super hot here right now. I feel like we don't get humidity, and I feel like I have that Toronto humidity right now.
But your hair looks great. There's not a lot of frizz, just a little bit on the side.
Thanks. It's a lot of hairspray.
I know.
No, it's just really greasy. The grease weighing it down.
But it looks good. It looks good. But there's so much going on for California right now. Kamala Harris, I mean, this is huge, huge news for so many people. Women, diversity, it has such an impact. When you found out, when it was officially announced, how did you react?
Oh, I mean, I think it was historic and definitely like exciting for women. But I think one of the things personally that I felt was that it was perfect for the time. Like it called on the moment. We just have gone through 4 years of a president who has in many ways, inspired this women's movement all over again. We've seen the biggest women's marches that we have in, generation. And then all of a sudden, you have this really great social awakening with Black Lives Matters and the global social awakening. And so you have Kamala Harris, who represents so much of that. Also, her family, being immigrants, and so much about immigration has been a topic for the last 4 years. So when you look at where the Democrats are and who the Democrats should choose as a vice president, I feel like it was a choice for the moment. So that was kind of my first reaction. What about you?
Yeah, I love the way you say that it's for the moment. I think we've been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time. It is time in 2020 to speak about this. The fact that when she was running against Bernie Sanders and she stepped down, I'm like, this means something. This means, I know this is not the end of Kamala Harris. I know we're going to hear more from her. And then Joe Biden talking about the fact that he wanted a female vice president, and for him to pick Kamala was just the moment. I was just waiting for that to happen. And yeah, she represents so much, the Black community, the Asian community, but also being a female. And at a time like this, we talk about the things that are happening around the world and what countries are doing well with the pandemic. And most of the places that are doing well, even Vancouver in British Columbia, the numbers are so low because it's led by females. I don't know. There's a lot of truth to that. Yeah. So I don't know if it's the way we are in terms of handling people's emotions on a different level and understanding what people are going through. But that says a lot. And so for her to be in this position, like you said, the timing is right. We need to socially heal. We've been talking about it. I keep saying that over and over. And that's the person we need in place. Yeah, Joe Biden's going to be the president, but I am more ecstatic at the idea of her becoming the vice president and being in the White House in that position, because hey, maybe she will be the next president. Who knows? It's just the way it's leading that way. So I'm really excited about her. And a little history about her. We talked about the fact that she is Asian. She's also Black. And her mother, her name, I may butcher this name, but I hope I don't, Shamala Gopalan, who's Indian Tamil, married to Donald Harris, a Black Jamaican, in 1963, and raised Kamala and her sister in Oakland, California. Harris was inspired by her grandfather, who was an Indian civil servant, and her grandmother, who were a community organizer. So the whole family is a part of this whole, understanding civil rights movement. Mother brought her up as a civil rights events, and so she learned about that. And so she's acknowledging this and she's embracing it. She even put a photo up of her mom that was while she was in India. So I love it. I love it. This is the news I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there was a sense with the Democratic National Convention, even though it was virtually over these few days, there was this sense from a lot of viewers and Democratic voters, and even even people who are still deciding where they're going to vote. But there was this takeaway of hope. And I think that a lot of that does come from Kamala's energy and the fact that she is a candidate that we haven't seen before. And she does represent something for the American people that they haven't had here before, not only being visibly Black vice presidential candidate, but also the fact that she is also the daughter of immigrants and that she has this other South Asian part of her as well. And as these things are getting more and more revealed, I do think that she brings, just by very nature of who she is as a candidate, not necessarily what she's saying, not necessarily her platform. And I think that's really important to differentiate, because who she is and what she stands for and what she's done is kind of different than actually what she represents as a candidate. She's not an extremely progressive candidate in terms of where she stands, but who she is by nature, interestingly, very progressive. So yeah, I think that she definitely has inspired a lot of hope, especially for women and women of color.
And there's been a lot of chat about the fact that she dominantly speaks about being Black rather than Asian, which I found very fascinating. I mean, that's not the way I looked at it. I was just like, yay, it's a woman of color. It's so exciting. But a lot of people have been talking about the fact that, well, some believe that she's not sharing the idea that she's Asian. I think she is, but it's also the reason of the political part of it is the fact that there's over 30 million Black Americans who are projected to vote rather than 11 million that are Asian. Maybe that's the reason behind it, but I believe that she is sharing both sides more than ever. But many say that she's just considering herself as a Black person.
Yeah, I think that that's more media coverage. I would agree with you. I don't think that she's ever hidden the fact that she's South Asian. If anything, I think that she talks about her mom more than she talks about her dad. And her mom is South Asian. She shows more photos of her mom than she shows of her dad. I mean, I think that her parents split, if I'm not mistaken, when she was around the age of 4 or 5. And so she really grew up with her mom, and her mom was South Asian. And so I think that, there is this disconnect between her and the South Asian community in the sense that you don't see her wearing a sari, or you don't see her like doing that. But I just don't think that's also her style. I mean, I don't think we've ever even seen her wear like a floral dress. Like that's not her, And so I don't know that she's trying to hide her South Asian. I do believe, though, that the media representation of her in America has very much overlooked throughout most of her career the fact that she was South Asian. And that could just basically be by virtue of something that you and I have talked about, Sangita, which is that media, especially American media, kind of sees things as Black, white, and now Hispanic. But even the Hispanic is pretty new, like for a long time it was just Mexican. Like people just didn't know. And even for myself, and we've talked about this, but when we go to auditions, it's like, oh, are you Black, white, or Hispanic? They don't realize that South Asian is even I don't think a lot of American people, this might be a very umbrella statement, but I think a lot of journalists might not necessarily know what South Asian represents. Like what are all the different communities that fall under that? And so people are learning. But I don't know that it's her. I think it's the media coverage of her that has been very proud about the fact that she's a Black woman. But I just don't think that they realize that she is biracial or they haven't covered it enough. Or like I've said a million times, I feel like a lot of in Toronto, in Canada.
I just hit my tooth. Ow. Sorry. It's my fake tooth too. You
have a fake tooth?
I have a fake tooth right there. This one.
You can't tell it's fake.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'll tell you a side note. I was in grade 6 and I caught a football. I was so proud of myself. I caught the football. I start running towards the touchdown and I hit the pole, went back, and my tooth came out.
Oh my God. And so, by the way, you're running towards the end zone to get a touchdown, but okay.
What was I doing? What was I doing? I caught the ball and I was running for a touchdown, no?
For a touchdown, yeah, but not to get to the touchdown. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I need to learn more, but I lost a tooth because of that. Yeah, so I just hit it. So it's like, okay, it's not coming off, is it? It's still okay.
That's crazy. I've never heard that. Well, you know what? It looks perfect. Your teeth look great. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I was having a conversation with Mike about this. I think because we both come from Toronto, Mike and I both come from Toronto. We live in California now, but when we were living in Toronto, and Canada is just so much more pluralistic, and people know, like, oh, where are you from? Are you from Trinidad? Are you from Guyana? Are you from Puerto Rico? Like, there's all these different. But when you're here, it's just like Black, white, Hispanic. Like nobody understands. Like the idea of even like biracial not being like white and something else is so like that's so new, like the idea that it could be like different mixes, where that's so normal in Canada. So I do think that the fact that she has not been represented in American media as being South Asian is more to do with the way that American media represents minorities, and it has to do with her hiding it. That's my gut feeling. I don't feel like she's hiding it. Do you?
No, and it's funny you say that because when she was running against Bernie Sanders, she actually did a video with Mindy Kaling and they were making something. I can't remember what it was, but it was an Indian dish and she was talking about her heritage and she was very open about it, celebrating. What was she making? I can't remember. Something really good. But she was cooking with Mindy Kaling. And that's when I really like, oh my gosh, she's Indian. Like she really is Indian. And so that was
Yeah.
a moment for me. And also the fact that when she was announced as the VP, I was watching some American news and the name was said wrong. It wasn't Kamala. It was Kamala Harris.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If this is the person who's running vice president of your country, you should know how to say the name. So that got
Yeah.
me ticked off, right? But you are right. Like it's maybe just understanding the culture, and they're learning through the process as well. And I think partly you and I having this conversation will educate some people on the
Yeah.
idea that she is Asian, and we are celebrating that part of it. And
Yeah.
I think that's important.
And I've actually noticed a lot of Black journalists, making that point. Like we are so proud that she is a Black female vice presidential candidate. But I've seen a lot of them on their social media say we cannot ignore the fact that she's also the first South Asian female candidate. And so I do feel like, that is being represented. I think when it comes to her own career, and, one of the things that's really important is that she's worked so much as as an attorney general in the criminal justice system. And her background is obviously very controversial when it comes to that. But her work is really in this time that we are in right now, when we're talking about, criminal reform and systematic racism. And I think police reform and all these things. I think one of the interesting things for us to remember is that this affects Black Americans more than anything else. So when people see that the fact that she is Black and she's helping, create laws and legislation, she really comes from a unique point of view. And so I do feel like if the conversation was like, oh my God, the criminal justice system in America is, unbelievably biased against South Asians, then we would talk more about how she was Indian,
Right.
Talking about it because that's what the conversation is right now. And like you said, there's just a majority population of Black Americans when it comes to the difference between South Asians. So I do think that people are just relating, more people who are Black are relating to her. I feel like, she's biracial. She's both races. Like, I don't think that she's one over the other.
I agree. And I think for us to be able to see that, the fact that she has different aspects, I mean, when you think of Asians, you think of people, even the Black community, you think about immigration, you really do. And we're hoping that she will put a exposure to the fact that immigration is so important to our country, to America. The people that we bring into this country is what they do and what it represents. I mean, we are the free world, or you're like America's the free world. We are too. But the idea of bringing all people together, it's amazing. It's just a fantastic moment that she's in place. And yeah, I'm looking forward to all of it. And the fact is, we talk about people, you and I have this conversation of who else is in politics that are women of color. And we talked about
She made
people
masala dosa, by the way. Sorry, I had to look that up. That was really
masala
funny.
dosa, that's it.
She made masala dosa with Mindy Kaling. Yeah, and we talked about that in another episode. She cooked with Mindy Kaling when she was running to be the presidential nominee for the Democratic National,
right,
for the Democratic Party. But that was great. And I think that's when a lot of Americans actually really found out about her background. Because I think until then, a lot of people did think she was just Black. And then they found out, oh, she actually has an immigration story in her background, which is so interesting considering the last 4 years there's been this anti-immigration sentiment. It's so interesting to have someone who's running for the most patriotic role in this country who has an immigration story. I mean, it turns that entire narrative on its head that you can't be patriotic and be an immigrant,
And I think about Indira Gandhi too, who was the prime minister of India for a very was assassinated. And you think about that, the idea that a woman was in place, that kind of position, a high power, and it hasn't happened again, right? So this is one of the things I'm hoping will lead the way for all countries to accept the idea of a woman being in charge. I mean, I think it's important. And I think the fact that this is going to be a moment for my kids to understand that it's possible. Like this is a learning curve. Like this is a year. I call 2020. I don't want to say the words. Forget it. Okay. I'll just say 2020 is a very educational year and we're all learning. I think our generation and their generation is something that's combining together to make sure they know the best. And I think our generation was so shy of even shy is maybe not the right. We ignored a lot A lot of issues we didn't want to deal with it, but now they're stepping up and saying we want to deal with it. So I think this is a great opportunity.
Though it is interesting because as you would expect, like right away, as soon as Kamala Harris is announced to be the vice presidential nominee for the Democrats, right away, you start seeing things about how she dresses. Is she too aggressive? Is she, all these very misogynistic kind of ways that we tear apart female leaders. And I think one of the interesting things about what you said with Indira Gandhi is, and a lot of, I think, different South Asian politicians, is that there is a history of South Asian politicians, and correct me if I'm wrong, being single. I mean, even though there have been like a lot of females in South Asian politics, in Indian politics especially, which is incredible, there is kind of this unwritten rule. Am I right? Like there's this unwritten rule. You can't be a family woman. Like, God forbid you're married or you have kids. Like, you have to kind of be single to be respected.
Which is so bizarre, right? It's just, it's a weird situation that no one talks about it, but it's the fact that that's the history of it. So it is interesting. And why does that happen? And it's, I'm going to go back for a second, because when I applied for a job, I just had my baby, and in the interview, I didn't mention that I was a mom. And I purposely did that because I almost felt a fear that because I was a new mom, that potentially I would not get that job. Right. So it is interesting. And I think it's, the idea also, a lot of us want to be more educated. So we're older and don't want to get married, and you're so focused on your education or whatever it is your career path is. And maybe that's part of it too. People who want to become prime minister, people who want to be in politics, maybe don't want to have a family. Maybe that's one of the reasons, but it is an interesting aspect.
Or is it the opposite? Or could it be that societal pressure says that a good woman or a good wife can never be that career determined? So like, is it, maybe it's both, maybe it's all those things, but I think that's really, really interesting. I think that's very, very interesting. I'm so curious to learn more about Shyamala Gopalan, Kamala Harris's mom, because I think it's so interesting that she moved to the United States, like at a pretty young age to like, she wanted to cure cancer, right? That was like her goal. And I think it's so interesting, like, what did her parents think when she moved her on her own back then? Like her Indian parents letting her. And then what did they think when she wanted to marry like a Black Jamaican American? Like, what did they, like, what did they? Because she obviously is still, if you Google search her, you see her with her Indian family. She's like with her aunts who are wearing saris and like you see photos. So she's obviously still very close to her Indian family. So I want to learn more about her mom. Like, I'm fascinated by her Indian mom who came down here. Like, Kamala Harris sounds like a total badass, but her mom sounds like an even more of a badass, right? Like,
I love
she did it
that.
at a time when I feel like you couldn't do it. So yeah, I love Kamala, but I think I love Shyamala more.
We need to do a whole segment just on her then. I think that's the idea there.
Right?
But yeah. So we would love to hear from you and your thoughts on this, because we're both very excited about the idea of her becoming the vice president. And, everyone has their own thinking behind it, but I think this is a good move for all of us, not just America, but just for us in general, and for women and women of diversity. I think this is a moment that we've been waiting for a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's very exciting that she's the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. I think I'm really interested to see what her debates will be like when she goes up against Vice President Mike Pence. I'm excited to see their back and forth. I think that'll be very telling. And I think she's somebody who, even when she was up in the debates against Joe Biden, she really took Joe Biden to the mat. I mean, she really laid it into him. And that was, that's now her partner in crime. So if she could do that to another Democrat who she's, still with, and she has no holds barred. I mean, she was very good friends with Beau Biden, Joe's son. And she just really it seems like she just really didn't let anybody get away with any BS. And so it'll be interesting how she holds the Republicans accountable when they get to those debates. Like, I can't wait to see her in the debates. I'm very excited. But yes, let us know what you guys think.
We should just do a live feed when that happens.
I know, right? Oh, by the way, I do want to mention one thing before we end, and I know we're close to the end, but one person we didn't mention who is also in American politics that I think is worth shouting out is actually a Republican. Her name is Nikki Haley. And if you don't know who Nikki Haley is, she was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations for Donald Trump, but she's, served in politics much longer than that. She is Indian. I'm pretty sure she's 100% Indian. And she's somebody who you do see wearing saris to events and like, so even political events. And she's very Indian, but she's an American Indian. And she's gotten kind of introduced to the country through the Trump administration. And so she's someone to keep an eye on. If you are interested in, in South Asian women in American politics, I would say, like, obviously follow Kamala Harris, but also look into Nikki Haley. She's somebody who's really, really setting the stage for herself right now.
And it's great that you talked about Nikki Haley, because one of the great things about Kamala Harris is she hired a press secretary, and her name is Sabrina Singh. She's 32 years old and she is Indian, and she's the first ever to be in that position. So it says a lot that she is recognizing diversity, South Asian women, Black women. So it is a wonderful moment that all of us, I feel like we're United Nations now. Like, it feels good. It feels like we're coming together.
Good.
Yeah. It feels good.
I think it'll also be interesting to see what the South Asian, voters are going to think about her, because she does have a pretty controversial background. And I don't think we can do this episode without also mentioning some of the controversy with some of the decisions she's made in terms of the South Asian community, right? So she has a bit of a controversial past with the Sikh community, but also the Muslim community and the Orthodox Jewish community. And it's because, do you want to tell the story, or do you want?
You go ahead.
Okay. So she basically,
I like positive news.
you guys can Google this. So years ago, she was California's Attorney General, and she decided to put in corrections department ban on prison guards having beards. And her reasoning for it was that they all got fitted with these gas masks. And then after they got fitted with the gas masks, they weren't able to grow beards unless it was for medical reasons. And a lot of people from the Sikh community, from the Muslim community, and from the Orthodox Jewish community said that wasn't fair. Why would you be allowed to grow a beard for medical reasons, but not for religious reasons? And so when it comes to, Muslim communities and the Sikh communities, especially, it's a lot of South Asian people who for years later were really mad at Kamala here in California for making that decision and not honoring their religion. And so, it'll be interesting to see how she navigates this, because her biracial identity is an interesting one. And she's an interesting and complex woman. And I think a lot of people, and especially the media, really are trying to make her very, what's the opposite of multifaceted? Like very
neutral,
unfaceted. Because even as a Black woman, she's made decisions as Attorney General when it comes to the criminal justice system that are also controversial. And so I think the fact that she is Black and she is brown and she is a woman sounds so progressive, but that's not necessarily where her thinking is. It's not necessarily where her decisions have been. But just because of her identity, people think she's very progressive. So I think she's an interesting candidate.
I think she's the right candidate. I think this is the way to go.
No bias or anything, Sangita.
I think she should just become the president. I think she should just take over.
There's a good possibility she could be. This is the thing. And we don't know how this will turn. We don't know if she'll ever be vice president. Republicans might win the next election. We're not sure. But if Joe Biden does win as president and she becomes vice president, it is interesting because Joe Biden has very openly said he's a transitional president. He wants to just be transitional. So after those first 4 years, what will happen? Will she... she's in a position to step into that role. So she is an important conversation, an important person for us to be keeping our eye on.
She truly is a pivotal moment right now. And, we always think about why is this all happening? Why is this year the way it is? What's this pandemic? There's always a reason that leads to something else. And I feel like this is one of those solutions that have come this way. Like, would she have been a discussion a few years ago? Probably not. We talked about Hillary Clinton and the fact that the people were not ready for a woman, yet they were ready for a Black president with Barack Obama, which blows my mind, the idea of that. But so is this the moment? And like you said, right off the top, this is the moment. This is what we needed.
Yeah, the moment calls for it. Although I will say my fiance, Mike, the day after that Donald Trump won the presidency and Hillary Clinton lost, Mike called that Kamala Harris would run.
Really?
Yeah, called it because she is from California, right? So we've known about her for a very long time. I've reported on her for a very long time. So she wasn't new for us. Yeah. So we were like right away, like Kamala, and sure enough, within the first 3 days of the election, she was like on Twitter, just very presidential, her statements. Like, so Mike actually, I'll give him props. He literally what called it. He was like, she's going to run for president and she's going to end up being like the next Democratic nominee. And he was close, vice presidential nominee.
Yeah. So, well, Mike wins. Mike wins.
No matter what happens with Kamala, Mike wins.
Mike wins. You need to throw a party. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. And let us know what your thoughts are. Leave some comments below. Subscribe. Am I missing anything, AJ?
No, make sure you subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and subscribe and like this video. We love having these convos with you. And if you have ideas for other videos we should do, comments below.
I know. Let's go play Battleship. I see your Battleship behind there.
I know. I love my old school board games. Cheers. Cheers.